Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and I just discovered to my pleasant surprise there's a new show which is a continuation, a direct sequel, basically a new season of the old X-Men cartoon from back in the 90s, which I grew up with when I was a little kid. I used to watch it a lot. I probably didn't see all the episodes because it was back on TV, and so I didn't always catch all the episodes, and so I'm not a huge expert about it, but I probably saw most of the episodes and I fondly remember that show, so it's very nostalgic for me personally. So when I saw there's a new continuation of it in the same style and set in the same time period, I was very curious to check it out and I just did, and it was much better than I expected. Because, a few times as an adult I actually went back and looked at the old cartoon and it was fun, but you can't really watch it and feel the same way you did as a kid, because as a kid it was so awesome. Now it's kind of a little bit silly, and as much as I loved it as a kid, it's not really the same as an adult. And yet this new season, it actually feels a little bit more mature, so I'm able to get into it and enjoy it even more than in the old episodes of the show. And of course the animation feels better. It's all very faithful to the original. It's in the same exact style. Everything looks the same as in the old show and yet better at the same time. And also they even play with their mutant powers in original ways that we haven't seen before, so it all feels very fresh. So it's not just recycling the same exact stuff that we saw back then, but they're actually adding new things to it, and so it all feels fresh at the same time. So it's also very nostalgic. Everything doesn't just look like in the old show, it's basically set in that same time period. So we see that it's still in the 90s in the show. They even show us the Twin Towers, I think, and we see a shop that says it has pagers in it, and we see what looks like a Star Trek logo in the city, and people don't seem to have cell phones, and they're dressed like in the 90s. So it's all very nostalgic because it's taking place in that time period as the original show did. And so even though we have some futuristic technology, and yet it's in the past, so I guess it's all alternate history, a different timeline to our own and all of that, so we can explain it away. And speaking of Star Trek, it was always funny back in the 90s. I'm sure I'm not the only one who noticed there were a lot of similarities between this X-Men show and Star Trek TNG, which was airing around the same time. Both teams were led by a bold leader who sits in a chair most of the time and has moral lessons to teach you and all of that. And there's a guy with a visor. There are telepathic women. They had holodecks in both shows. In the X-Men, it's called the Danger Room, which is basically a holodeck. And some of the props are similar. There was an episode of TNG in which some admiral came on board on some kind of a futuristic wheelchair, which looked very similar to Professor X's chair in X-Men. And also in X-Men, they're always pressing on their badges to speak with each other, just like the communicators in Star Trek. And so there's a ton of similarities. Wolverine being angry all the time and wanting to fight and having to be restrained by Xavier is very similar to how Worf's advice always gets shut down by Picard. And so there are so many similarities that a lot of people poked fun at, and I myself made some parody edits in which I basically combined the two, showing the Enterprise crew as if they became mutants with the mutant powers. I made a lot of jokes like that with editing. So seeing this show coming back to life like this is almost as powerful to me as that scene in season 3 of Picard when they came back on board the Enterprise D, and it was like in the good old days of TNG. So it's almost the same kind of feeling watching this show, and it was by complete surprise to me. I had no idea this was in the making. I had no idea this was coming. I suddenly discovered it's a thing, and I watched it, and it's great. It has a lot of cool moments, as I said, original, fresh ideas as well, and even some of the silliest aspects somehow were done better, so it's not as childish as some of the old episodes. Even the Sentinels, which I remember even as a kid, I thought they were a little bit silly the way they looked, but they actually managed to make them kind of cooler in this first episode. And there's a scene when Wolverine is running toward one of them, and then Gambit suddenly jumps on him, and he charges his claws with his energy. And then Wolverine jumps at the Sentinel and cuts his head off. And I thought that was a really cool scene for several reasons. First of all, it's kind of a reference to the movies as well, because in one of the X-Men movies, there was also a scene when Wolverine was thrown by someone toward the Sentinel and cut his head off, and also there were scenes showing that if his claws get heated up, then they can cut better through other adamantium and all of that. And so seeing Gambit using his energy to charge Wolverine's claws to make them kind of like lightsabers, I thought it's kind of a reference to all those scenes. And maybe some people will complain saying, wait, I thought every time he charges something it makes it blow up, so how come Wolverine's claws don't blow up? Well, it's made from adamantium, which is indestructible, so obviously it wouldn't blow up, so it simply made them more powerful. It made them like lightsabers for a short while until he discharged it at the enemy. So I thought it was a really cool scene. I don't think it violates anything, so I didn't have any problem with it. I thought all this new stuff they're showing us is actually great. It's adding to it, it's making it feel fresh and original, even though it's a continuation of such an old show. And the characters were all very faithful to how they should be and how I remember them. You know, Beast is quoting some intellectual stuff that he read in books and all of that. So all these elements, all the characters are acting exactly as I remember them from that cartoon. And even some references to the more recent movies, as I mentioned. And there's some fresh new character development as well. You know, Cyclops is now the leader of the X-Men, and Magneto is kind of turning back to the good side. Another thing they did really good in this new season is they made it accessible to anyone, because they explain things enough that you get it. You don't have to go back and watch the old show to get the things that you see here. They even bring a new character of some new kid that they recruit or trying to recruit to the X-Men, which is kind of like what they did with Jubilee in the beginning of the X-Men cartoon. She was the new character that is like used for exposition, that everyone are explaining everything to her. So here she is explaining it all to some new kid that they saved, and so he's the exposition kid now. And so they made it in a way that anyone can watch the show. They can start with this new season and that will be enough. You don't have to go back and watch the old one to understand what's happening here. And also, if you saw the X-Men movies, of course you'll get, even though there are some discrepancies, it's not exactly the same, but there are also similarities. And also they made the character of Morph, who is a shapeshifter, into one of the main characters in this new show. And I remember him from the old cartoon, that he was like a recurring character that appeared once in a while, because he actually kind of defected to the bad side. He became one of the bad mutants, and then in the end he came back and became one of the good ones. And here he's a main character again, and I really like it because I remember I really loved that character even back in the old cartoon. Maybe because I just love shapeshifters. There's a lot of fun stuff you can play with them, with shapeshifters, and so it's great to see him as one of the main team. And also Jean Grey is pregnant with Cyclops' baby, which I think they're going to tie with that future war stuff. I remember in the old cartoon there was that whole future war with the Sentinels in the Days of Future Past, all that Terminator type of stuff in the future, and one of the soldiers that was sent back in time from that future turned out to be their son. And so I think the baby they're now having is probably going to turn out to be that same character. And so a lot of the stuff that seems to be like soap opera is probably leading somewhere. It's not just filler, it's not just here for the sake of drama. It's probably part of the bigger plot, hopefully. And so I'm really hoping the quality will not drop in later episodes, because I'm going to keep watching. I really enjoyed these first 2 episodes of this show. To my big surprise, I saw the trailer and liked it, but I didn't think the actual show will be so good. And so it was even better than the old cartoon that I remember. Whenever I try to rewatch some old episodes, it was a little bit hard to do, because, you know, I'm not a kid anymore. It's hard to accept some of the silliest stuff. And yet here they actually made it kind of for the whole family. So it's more for adults as well. It's not just for kids. And the characters are kind of evolving and changing. There's character development. And it's all faithful to the original, and yet it's pushing the story forward. So it was a very pleasant surprise to me. I will keep watching it. I probably will not review every episode, because I just don't have the time, especially with Star Trek Discovery coming up, and the Fallout show, which I'm also very excited about. I mean Fallout, not Discovery. Discovery, I will have to endure it just to be making the reviews and parody videos and all of that. I'm sure there will be a lot of things to poke fun at, but Fallout I'm actually really excited about, because it looks great. There are some new clips that came out showing actual scenes from the show, and I think they nailed it as well. So I will have a lot of stuff to review soon, so I probably will not be reviewing every episode of this new X-Men, but I will definitely review the whole season when it comes out. So that's all for now. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss it all in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.